Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mark Alpland, and I am the VP of Design at Onfido. And today we'll be talking about the onboarding evolution. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Onfido, we help organizations like Tesco and HSBC establish trust with customers by verifying identities anchored in a government-issued identity document, facial biometrics, and a host of other signals of real identity. Now, it should come as no surprise to hear that how our customers interact with our businesses has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And this has only accelerated during the global pandemic. There's a running joke that it was your COVID rather than your CEO or CTO that led your company's digital transformation over the last few years. And we've certainly seen this reflected in the seismic shift towards digital channels. And along with this shift for businesses, we've also seen changes to consumer behavior, specifically the growing movement towards these online channels. Consumers are 3 times likelier now than before the crisis to say that their future consumer interactions will be digital in nature. And nowhere have we felt this more than in that onboarding moment. So today I'm joined by 3 fantastic panelists, and together we'll be talking about how user expectations of sign up have and will continue to change. Let's start with a round of introductions. Sharon, Scott, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Scott. I'm the product lead for our digital sales team within Tesco Bank. I head up the teams that look after our website and our onboarding journeys. Been with Tesco Bank about 9 years and in the digital space for around 20 years. And just realised that's showing my age a little bit. So thank you for having me.
Welcome. And next up, we have Nicole Perry. Nicole, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Nicole Perry and I am a Global Strategy Director at 11FS, specialising in digital business design. And what that really means is we help clients think about all of the components that they should have in the business to enable them to take advantage of new alternative revenue streams and digital business models. And then we help design and craft strategies to take advantage of those and all the way through into execution. I've got a mixed industry and consulting background. Before 11FS, I was at Virgin Money, working in the group strategy team and with the Chief Commercial Officer to focus in on our growth strategy and the build of the digital wallet. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Aaron.
So Aaron Gominda, I head up a team at HSBC looking after our third-party services area within our security and anti-fraud division. And been with HSBC for 4 years, my first foray in banking, but been in various industries within digital products for the last 15 years.
Amazing. So Sharon, I'd love for you to kick off your conversation. So we talked a little bit about the shift in customer expectations. So for you, how have your customers' expectations changed and what do you see driving that change?
I think customer expectations have changed quite dramatically. The world's a very different place now to what it was 2 years ago. And I think that financial services providers have changed hugely, expedited by the pandemic. I think the move from branches to digital banks has moved at a pace we thought wasn't possible. And that's in part, I think, due to late digital adopters being forced to go digital, enable them to manage their finances. I think the other change in expectations is other industries are setting expectations. So I think we used to shop online and find it groundbreaking that we could get a delivery the next again day, and that's now the same day or even within an hour. And I think that now that digital experiences have quickened in all aspects of our life, then there's an expectation that financial services should follow as well. And I think finally with fintechs, they are leading the way. They're disrupting the status quo with onboarding experiences. They're bringing simple, intuitive digital experiences to customers and providing another option, I think, for customers who aren't getting the digital experiences that they expect from the bigger banks.
And Nicole, well, this is certainly the case at Tesco. Is this something you see reflected in the larger marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. To Bill's and Sharon's point, fintechs have completely disrupted that. We've known that for a good few years now, and I think there's been a real shift in attitude towards fintechs. Before it was, well, they don't make any money and they'll never survive, and all they have is current account, secondary account customers. Whereas actually what we're seeing now is that some fintechs and platform businesses like Klarna, for example, are genuinely disintermediating some traditional banking products. So, a lot of the clients that we work with, and certainly in-house, when I've been in-house at banks before, there is a real fear about the lending book being disrupted and customers genuinely taking lending options elsewhere. So I think we've seen a shift from, oh, they're kind of changing customer experiences and we can respond to that, to they are genuinely creating new innovation in the market that I, as a leader of a bank or a decision maker, just can't keep up with. And sometimes it's difficult for people to understand why that's actually happening. How has Klarna got to such scale? Why are people obsessed with Monzo? I don't understand. I have energy switching in my banking app. I've got budgeting in my banking app. Why are my customers not finding this useful? And I think what it all sort of boils to is a couple of things, is that fintechs genuinely design their products, services and offerings genuinely around customer need. And secondly, we're seeing a sort of extension of the value chain. So previously we had transactional payment rails, we had banking products, and then we had banking capabilities, and that's where banks and sort of digital banks played. But now, through a combination of partnership and new technologies, we're actually seeing intelligent services and embedded journeys emerge, often referred to as embedded finance. So that kind of restructuring of the value chain, partnerships across the ecosystem, and genuinely designing with the customer at the heart of everything you do is creating net new innovation and net new solutions in the market that quite simply banks can't, in their current state, can't keep up with. But should they do things a little bit differently, which is what we try to help them do at 11FS, there is potential for them to join into.
And Aaron, with this shift in customer and user expectations and this focus on that customer need that Nicole was talking about, do you think we've really delivered on this promise of truly digital onboarding? Has this seismic shift found its way into that onboarding moment?
I think we're certainly progressing in the right direction, and I think we're heading there towards, creating that truly remarkable onboarding journey for customers. The focus from our side has always been on how we make the onboarding process as simple and as easy for a customer. And I think the reality that we need to face is no one wants to sign up for a bank account. I mean, let's look around. No one wants to sign up or register for anything. The sign up process is actually what's standing in the way from you getting access to the product or service. So you have to try and find a way to do this as quickly and as simply and as straightforward as you possibly can. At the same time, at least, an opinion for me is that I think we should be offering the best experience for a customer in the channel they choose to engage with us. For most customers, that will be digital, but there will still be customers from an HSBC side that want to interact with us in branches. So we have a responsibility to make sure that our branch experience is just as great as that digital experience. Any channel you choose to engage with HSBC has to be absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I think like everyone has said so far, customers are becoming significantly more digitally active than before. So that experience just has to be outstanding for them whenever they're engaging.
And that balance between digital and branch or brick and mortar must be something you feel at Tesco as well, Sharon. So any reflections from your experience around how you've delivered on the promise of digital onboarding?
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, customers see Tesco as one entity, whether they're shopping or they have their money with us. If you can sign up for a club card in minutes and we can deliver groceries to you within an hour, then we shouldn't have customers going through a lengthy onboarding journey at Tesco Bank or waiting a week to get their PIN or credit card through the post. So as we begin to offer more sort of joint product offerings between your shopping needs and money needs, we need to make sure that we've got a coherent experience for a Tesco shopper, no matter whether they're shopping with us or banking with us. So we're undergoing a sort of digital sales transformation to try and bridge that gap between the experiences.
And Nicole, if we wanted to take a step back and look more broadly out into the marketplace, you talked about this feeling that some of the new entrants into the space, the Klarnas and the Monzos, have a glow about them. Now, what can banks or some traditional businesses really take from some of these best-in-class experiences? So what are some lessons we can learn from watching them?
Sure, I think, again, it kind of comes back to the point about creating net new innovation and seeing partnerships as a way to do that, rather than seeing partnerships with fintechs as a bolt-on to an existing proposition. So rather than saying, okay, we're going to add accounting software to our business banking product, it's about what capabilities do we see in the market that we can match with capabilities that we have as a bank that some fintechs don't have, and then discovering together what is the best solution for your customer needs. And each segment of customer have different outcomes that they look to achieve. We use a framework called Jobs to be Done, and it's about the outcomes that customers want to achieve in their lives, not the banking products that they want to get. A kind of age-old example of how do you help a customer create a beautiful, safe family home that they feel comfortable in, rather than how do we sell them a mortgage product. And actually, you can imagine, you can think about all the things in that home buying journey that are non-FS. That's, the hiring of the van, it's the buying of the furniture, choosing of the paint. How can banks interact with fintechs and people outside of the financial services ecosystem to create that a fantastic, amazing experience? And I think that's what we've seen some of the best fintechs do. So partnerships is one. We just talked about having the customer at the heart of everything that you do, and then being really purposeful about your digital transformation. Quite often banks pursue a digital transformation journey that's kind of attempting to turn an oil tanker, all the way around in the sea, whereas actually, how do you deploy a series of lifeboats instead? And that's a really complex challenge to solve, but it can be done. And it's taking inspiration from the architecture that we see in fintechs and deciding what parts of the bank could perhaps be transformed bit by bit, rather than transformation of the whole organization. And yeah, I think that's probably, I mean, there's so many that you could take. Probably my last one would be is really thinking purposefully about your relationship with your customers, and particularly when we think about onboarding, it's actually potentially asking, well, when does your onboarding journey end? Are you seeing it end when they've opened the account, but they've still to get their PIN, they've still to receive their card? Actually, you're still to build a relationship with them. It's framing these problems and these journeys in slightly different ways to just bring new solutions, new innovation, and a bit of a spark about your organisation and a competitive differentiator that others don't have.
There's so much inspiration to be taken from within fintech. I also see a lot of inspiration outside of the world of fintech. What we found in our user research at Onfido is that users bring the context from experiences from outside of the identity verification moment, their experiences logging into their phone, or their experiences at the airport into that identity verification moment. So that context comes in and those expectations come in. And Aaron, have you found that you at Tesco at HSBC have taken inspiration from outside of fintech when designing your approach? And what are some things that you bring in to your thinking?
So I think you have to look outside financial services when you're looking at onboarding, and particularly when looking at customer engagement. I think from my perspective, looking at one industry gives you a very limited view in terms of how you're going to work with your customers. Every digital company right now, every company is looking at their onboarding process and refining it to make it easier, make it quicker. I think We're starting to reach that stage where every field of information that's being asked for when onboarding a customer should be questioned. Why do you need your potential customer to give you that bit of information right at that very point in time? And on top of that, every single second that they are spending doing an onboarding journey is being investigated. We've got to look at, we reached that level now where it's not just about, seismic shifts in onboarding where you can slash minutes off a journey. You're now getting to that point of slashing seconds off a journey. And exactly what Nicole has said, it doesn't end at the point of onboarding. It has to be, the onboarding journey is your very first step to a lifetime engagement with a customer. And how you do that is really important. At the same time, we can't forget we're a highly regulated industry, so we have to be realistic about what we can and can't do. With other industries and with other sectors, they can be a little bit more free in terms of how they onboard a customer. But again, the regulation is a constraint, and we can't let those constraints become hard blockers in impacting the experience we offer to customers. We have to embrace those, make them work for us.
Absolutely. Now, Sharon, thinking about your approach to customer onboarding, what would you say Tesco's superpower is? What does Tesco do really, really well or better than anyone else?
I think it's probably the access to the customer base we have through Tesco shoppers. In our most recent onboarding journey, we launched our new Clubcard Pay Plus proposition, and that takes us nearly all the way to a fully end-to-end digital journey. Tesco shoppers apply from the grocery app. We'll pre-populate the application with data that we have on them, so we're recognising them and their value as a Tesco shopper. It's then simple, intuitive application, and at the end they're set up to manage their money within the mobile app, and that includes things like seeing their Clubcard points and being able to round up their savings on their shopping to put into the bank. So we're really bringing together, I guess, their shopping life and their money life, and it means that they can start using the card straight away because we have Onfido technology, which we're using for anti-impersonation. So as soon as the account's open, customers can then top up their card, and as soon as their plastic comes, they're set up and can spend away. So yeah, I think that's probably our unique place in the market.
And Aaron, same question. What do you feel you do really, really well in your onboarding journey?
So I think one of the key things that we're pushing for with when we are onboarding customers is how do we get to that stage where you as a customer are getting that, I mean, similar to what Sharon touched on, where you're getting that decision right away. There's no longer this wait and this delay. But more so than that, how do we start introducing new capabilities and new technology within that onboarding journey that enables you to use that account immediately? So it's not just about getting a decision immediately and not needing to go to a branch to finish the account opening process, but can you get a virtual card at the end of your onboarding journey? So you're not just getting a bank account or sort code, but you get that virtual card that enables you to start spending right away. One of the key benefits from HSBC's side as well is the global presence of the organization. So really pushing that global coverage of the bank. That moment of you as a customer, if you happen to, from someone in my own shoes where I've moved country, and the biggest challenge when you move to a new country is opening up a bank account. Make it really simple. When I'm in the US and I'm moving to the UK, have the bank account open, ready for me to start using immediately, and do that all digitally. That's a massive shift for customers in that particular segment.
Now, one of the barriers to adding value immediately sometimes is a barrier from even accessing a product or service at all. In Onfido, we invest a lot of time and effort into our accessibility to make sure that we're opening up access to as many people as possible, and certainly with the regulatory space and a lot of the friction that we feel in fintech and financial services, there are many points at which drop-off can occur. And so Sharon, how do you ensure that you don't leave people behind when creating your digital onboarding experience?
We test we test again, and then we test some more. So we co-create with our customers. We get them to help with ideation, to test prototypes, to tell us what sentence of copy would work best. And we look for diversity when recruiting our customers to do testing with. So to ensure that we're covering all customer needs, we make sure we have a range of vulnerability and disabilities, and to make sure that we're covering as wide a range of customers as possible. And I think it's really important that we don't leave colleagues behind either. So when we're doing customer testing, we make sure all of the product team is invited along. So that's from our Scrum Masters to our developers, or analysts, and we encourage the whole team to come along so that they can hear what the customer needs are and make sure that we're designing and building experiences that really matter to customers. And I think finally, just in terms of delivery, we've got an ethos of progress, not perfection. So we get our experiences out to customers, we learn from them, and we've got robust feedback loops in place so that we can listen to our customers and then iterate on what they're telling us about the experiences.
As I said in the beginning, in my opening, that COVID has really changed the game for a lot of us, and certainly it's changed the pace at which we've had to deliver digital experiences. And what that's meant for some of the larger banks, larger financial institutions, is we've had to work more like a lot of the challenger banks that we're seeing out there. And so Nicole, when in your work as a consultant, what can some of these larger organizations learn from the way that these challenger banks operate? We've talked a little bit about the features and putting customers at the center of everything they do, but operationally, what are some things that we can do better to deliver high quality onboarding experiences quicker?
Sure. I mean, first off, before we get to the answer to your question, I think the banks did an unbelievable job in COVID. I was working in-house at Virgin Money when COVID came around, and it was just amazing how fast things got done and how quickly decisions were made. And I know at Virgin Money, we did a lot of reflection at the time of why have we not been working like this all the time? And I think it would be so easy to fall back into the habit of governance structures, bureaucratic ways of making decisions, kind of hesitancy, fear of doing the wrong thing. And that's what fintechs and startups and neobanks, they don't have. They have to make decisions quickly. They have to ship product quickly, and they have to get a feel for what customers like and see if it makes money or not. So I think that was a huge learning, and I would encourage anyone who has any influence in that space in a bank to continuously raise and challenge, are we being as effective as we could be and as effective as we were in that time of that really intense pressure cooker of COVID. Of course, it came with a lot of stress, but what are the benefits that you can take out of that to take into a healthier environment minus the onset of a global pandemic? So I think what is underestimated when thinking about operationally how to act more like a fintech, we all know about agile, we all know about sort of empowered teams and working quickly, testing and everything, but where I think you see real blockers in the organization is how these things are funded and governed. So quite often organizations will try to put squads in place or try to do agile at scale. So the project development is in an agile fashion, but actually the funding and decision making around what gets funded is still very waterfall. So actually the two don't match. And then secondly, you have agile ways of working at the grassroots level of the organisation, but very waterfall thinking at the top. And it's quite a difficult thing to confront in your organisation, because quite often the waterfall thinking happens with the key decision makers and in the C-suite. So actually there needs to be a bit of give and take. It can't just be we implement this in the ground and we expect it to work. There has to be a real mindset shift of the leaders in the organisation as well. So I think governance, funding, leadership and mindset is the only way that you will actually make things happen more quickly, more efficiently in the business. and from a cost perspective, trying to understand where the cost lies in the business, because again, that's where the fintechs will really outperform banks, is that their cost to serve a customer is £3, banks is £30. So no wonder they can't innovate at the same pace. And being really pragmatic and analytical, and kind of trying to get to the root cause of that cost in the organisation, and being very mindful about how to remove that, again, in a sort of hit squad type fashion, rather than here's a cost transformation programme and it's, you know, £800 million worth, and we're going to change it. It'll take 4 years to realise the benefits, etc. It's just about being faster, more nimble, and attacking small bits of the organisation rather than trying to change it all at once.
Erin, does this resonate with the type of change that you've seen at HSBC relative to the influence that challenger banks or the pandemic has had on your operations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, something that's interesting that Nicole just mentioned, which is, you know, adopting an agile mindset and agile ways of working has become such a massive push for us as an organization, from, as you say, the C-suite down. It was a very conscious decision to go, you know, if you're going to adopt agile, it cannot be your engineering teams work in agile, which means we're an agile organization. It has to be everybody. Everyone is now talking about working in agile, working in sprints, working in this type of way, and it does make a big difference. But I think one of the big things the challenges have brought in is that the traditional banks allowed regulations and restrictions to limit the way we engaged with our customers. The challenges came in and just, I think, changed more around opinions on what we can offer to customers, how we can talk to them, how we can engage with them. You know, an example I can give is you know, what Onfido offers. This would never have been so widely adopted without the challenger banks. As I mentioned before, you know, digital journeys, you know, great digital journeys will embrace constraints rather than allow themselves to be limited by them. The constraint the challenger banks faced was they didn't have a branch network to support them when they were rolling out, which means if you couldn't offer a straight through decision to a customer at the point of onboarding, there was no fallback. There was nowhere to send that customer if it went wrong. They used that constraint to completely change the way we onboard customers to a bank. And that, to me, I think, is where the real seismic shift is coming. They're really looking at this from almost you know, they looked at this from a blank piece of paper. Rather than trying to build on what others did, they went start from scratch. Go right to the very beginning. Again, Nicole mentioned, you know, jobs to be done. Go all the way back to, why do I need a bank account? And start answering those questions and completely rethink that approach. And I think that way of thinking is forcing every traditional bank to adopt that same rationale and that same way of thinking.
And Sharon, how has this way of thinking changed things at Tesco's? Have been disruptive or transformative? Is it something you think will stick?
Yeah, transformative for sure. So I think the first 6 months of COVID was absolutely crazy from a digital perspective. Everyone throughout the business wanted our processes and experiences put online. And that, I think, roadmaps were accelerated so quickly and condensed. And now I think we've probably setting expectations for ourselves on how we deliver quicker. And I completely agree with Nicole and Aaron around agile. I think the pandemic has actually accelerated our embedding of agile. We always did it within digital, but I think from a company-wide perspective, it's definitely got the buy-in and profile that it needs to be embedded throughout the organisation. It's just letting us get things out to customers a lot quicker, and we're definitely seeing a lot more positives around getting small iterative deliveries out, getting customers to feedback on them and optimising them from there. So it's definitely been transformative.
And I want to get us back to talking about onboarding. And Erin, I want to pick up on something you said a little bit earlier. You said the sign-up moment is a barrier for people. And it's friction, right? And one of our key findings from some recent user research that we've run on user friction is that we've been too focused on the number of clicks or the number of pages rather than on how users experience friction, right? How they experience it emotionally or the context we set around it. And so Aaron, I'd love to hear more about how you think about friction and user friction in HSBC and how you manage it thoughtfully.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's again, I feel friction is sometimes a necessary component for customer interaction. I mean, there are moments where you will speak to customers and something will happen really, really quickly and you go like, that felt a bit weird. So you do sometimes need that level of friction. And I mean, again, some people may say that asking for a customer to take a picture of their ID and a selfie and do challenges, well, that you're adding friction to a journey. But if you look at the alternative, which is sending the customer to a branch to verify their identity, suddenly that bit of friction in the journey doesn't feel so painful anymore. So I think a lot of what we look at is how we make sure that the friction that does come into a journey, whether it's onboarding, whether it's existing day-to-day journey, the existing day-to-day interaction for a customer, that friction has to take place when it's needed and has to feel necessary. And again, we look at it across everything. It's not just onboarding. So, for example, when you make a payment to a new beneficiary, should there be a little bit more friction in that journey? And what should that look like? How should that work? An example I give is, you're going to buy a house and you're a first-time buyer, and you're going to go and you're going to basically transfer your life savings to a random solicitor. That moment, for anyone who's done it, is probably one of the most terrifying things ever. You want to have that reassurance. If you're going to empty out an account and send it to somebody, you want the bank to just go, are you sure? And maybe let's just double check that this is actually you doing this rather than somebody else, just again to be on the safe side. Again, we have to make sure that there will be friction in the journey. There's no way to get rid of it, but we just have to make sure that it's justified and we make it as unobtrusive as possible. So that when it is there and it's unavoidable, the customer should see as little of it as possible.
Sharon, in our pre-conversation yesterday, you had a really good example of managing your customers' expectations or friction around friction using a spinner. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, this was really interesting output from customer testing that we did. So we're looking at a new onboarding journey for loans. So from a technical perspective, we had the capability to do real-time checks and give the customers an immediate decision. And thinking this was a brilliant thing, we had the decision page coming back in real time. There was no waiting around for the customer. But the response from customers was that it felt too quick. They questioned, are you really doing all the necessary checks on me? They just wanted a little bit of reassurance that we were taking our time to do the right checks. And so we introduced a 5-second spinner, which we didn't actually need, but from a customer perspective, it tested really well. And they then felt reassured that the journey that they were going on was, the right thing. We were doing the right thing as a bank. As Aaron said, I think there is a perception that less pages and speed is always a good thing, but I think it's important sometimes to introduce that little bit of friction, slow customers down. We want them to pause and think about what they're doing, and I think that then drives confidence and a bit of certainty around the decisions that they're making, and especially when it's a loan or some kind of big financial commitment that the customer's getting into.
I couldn't agree more. That research I mentioned earlier that we ran at Onfido around friction found that the foundations of a good user experience in that identity check moment during onboarding comes down to trust. People need to trust that your data is being used responsibly, that they feel in control, that they're in control of the experience, and they're in control of their data, and confidence. They're confident that they're doing it right and they're doing the right thing. They're confident they know why they're giving up that data, and that trust, control, and confidence. As long as we meet those 3 expectations, we can manage frictions. We can add friction as long as we add it in a way that encourages trust, control, and confidence. So Nicole, looking forward into the future, gazing into our crystal ball, what do you think onboarding will look like 3 to 5 years from now? What new technologies or rising technologies do you think are going to be especially important and are going to drive the next sort of the next innovations in the space?
I always find that I'm never very good at answering. I'm never very good at predicting with my crystal ball. But I was having a think about kind of examples of where we might see short-term changes and then medium and long term. And I've selected sort of a few concepts, I suppose, rather than technologies themselves. But you know, to Sharon's point around some customers weren't comfortable or were getting feedback that it was too fast a journey. You know, it might be that we get to in the future where we give customers choice in the speed of onboarding. So we talk a lot about digital customers, but actually, as a result of COVID, we now have this huge segment of digitized and digital customers in the UK and in every market really, or most developed markets in the world. But actually, there's so many individual digital segments in that overall digital customer group. So actually, a Gen Z individual may want to onboard at a completely different speed than someone who is older and has only just been introduced to digital banking. And wouldn't it be great if, as they can customize their own onboarding journey so that they're comfortable? And there's a variety of different techniques. So you actually drive real efficiency with one cohort, but then you manage to keep another cohort happy and comfortable with that journey. And the more sort of medium term, I think an absolute game changer would be a centralized digital ID. Quite often people think these are really futuristic concepts, but actually Estonia has had one since I think it's 2011. And so you can imagine if I had my driver's license that I carry my wallet in a form of digital, you know, in my phone or in my digital wallet, if that linked with all of my financial institutions, my Amazon account, my like Tesco account, you would be authorized once by you as an individual and a citizen in that country. And then actually that becomes the way that you're onboarded into any institution that you interact with. And then thirdly, I've always found the concept of holograms really fascinating and whether they'll have use cases beyond bringing prints back to life. But, you know, could it be that you are verified in your living room by a bank manager, you know, hologram that comes in? And yeah, I don't know if that takes us back from selfie verification or puts us, you know, more progressive than that, probably backwards, to be honest. But, you know, is that what we would see in the future? Who knows?
Some might argue that it maybe doesn't get any better than bringing prints back, but or maybe the total opposite. But
maybe
Sharon,
Prince, he could verify us. That would be interesting. Or you pick your favorite celebrity. Anyway, that's the topic of conversation for another day. Sharon,
same question to you. Looking ahead, what rising technologies do you think will be transformative in the onboarding moment?
I love the thought of Prince coming back to check my ID and V. So I think onboarding will be more personalised. I think it's going to be underpinned by greater data privacy and security. I think customers are becoming more and more aware of security and their sort of privacy rights and how we protect their data. I think it might be more product agnostic. So how do we onboard a customer and identify their financial needs and not necessarily they choose a product to then apply for? So that's maybe getting a little bit different from individual sort of product onboarding journeys. I think we probably need to think about more than just a product. So customers are looking for brand awareness, sustainability, what we stand for as a company, and how do we reassure them throughout the onboarding journey that they're onboarding with the right company that will look after them. And I think we'll be using open banking, digital KYC and AI a lot more, and customers will be up and running with their products within minutes. Yeah, I think a lot of exciting stuff in the onboarding space coming up, I'm sure.
Aaron, anything that you are looking forward to?
Yes, I think a lot of what's been said already. I mean, I think, again, it still drives down towards how you make it simpler, how you find new technologies to make the process even easier. So things like, I I completely, Nicole mentioned the digital ID in Estonia, and we're seeing in Singapore a complete game changer with a service called SingPass, which is available to any Singaporean who's then able to you log into SingPass and you can share that information with a bank, with the government, anything, pay your taxes, verify your verify details. It becomes a massive game changer in terms of how we're able to make the process even simpler. And I think more countries around the world are going to start adopting that. Again, similar to what Sharon mentioned, I think security is going to continue to become really important, and trust is going to be really important. I mean, there was research that was done a couple of years ago that showed that people trusted banks with their data more than they trusted the government with their data, which I found quite fascinating in the UK, considering a lot of that data came from the government in the first place. But that is a level of trust that cannot be abused and cannot be taken for granted. And I think that's always going to be a massive push for the big banks. The two other bits I think they're going to be really important with the onboarding process is around how you're making your products and services as accessible to customers as possible. I think a drive towards even greater levels of accessibility are going to continue to dominate within the onboarding space. And the last bit for me is I don't think you can ever remove people from the equation either. So again, that moment of if you are signing up for a bank account, yeah, going in, signing up for a current account, doing that online, super simple, straightforward. But if you want a mortgage and you aren't really financially savvy and you're a bit confused about what's going on in the market, make it really easy for someone to go in and have a phone call with a person or go into a branch and sit down with someone. And chances are in half an hour, a face-to-face conversation will be a total game changer for somebody who's a first-time buyer for a house than someone who, might be a little bit more savvy than that. And yeah, just I think those will be the big seismic shifts we're going to continue to see.
Fantastic. And as we close out today's webinar, Nicole, do you have any parting thoughts or advice you'd give to our listeners for how they can approach transforming their own onboarding experience? How would you sum up all of the good advice that we've given today?
As a summary, I would say look at thin vertical slices of the bank and attack them rather than thinking about how do I make onboarding completely horizontal across all of my functional areas or products. It's what product journey could I make really, really stand out, and then test it, iterate it, use it as a benchmark and a blueprint for replication across the organisation. And a singular customer view is key. I love Sharon's point about how do we onboard a customer as a customer of the bank rather than a current account customer and a credit card customer. I think where we are seeing products going is the product suite is kind of agnostic. You just have an account that happens to have a credit line and manages your money and has budgeting and allows you to pay and allows you to send money overseas and whatnot. What I would encourage you to think beyond how do we get selfie ID into our onboarding journey today. That is of course great, but look beyond that. How do we want to welcome our customers to the bank as a customer rather than an individual or an account that's needing processed? And yeah, just as we've talked about, is a lot of the fintech innovations that have come around from people that don't think like bankers, and they don't kind of sit in a boundaried box of, well, this is what the regulator says and this is what our competitors do. I think it was Aaron that mentioned kind of reach for the stars, I suppose. So yeah, good luck. It's not easy, but it can be done.
Aaron, any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Yes, I think just onboarding, you've got to look at it again. I mean, I probably sound like a broken record when I say it, but it's got to be quick. It's got to be easy. Keep reminding yourself that the customer actually doesn't want to do this. No one wakes up and goes, I'm going to open up a bank account today. The onboarding process is always going to be in the way of getting them what they want. One of the challenges we face at HSBC is how do we create an incredible world-class onboarding process that is fantastic for customers in 39 different retail countries in which we operate in, rather than creating 39 different onboarding journeys and different flows. And the last point I'd say is just, again, similar to what Nicole has just said now, which is don't look within the financial services industry. Other industries have been focused on customer onboarding for a lot longer than we have. Learn from as many different journeys as you possibly can. From working in other industries, I can tell you that no one else looks at just their own sector for onboarding, and neither should we. We should always be looking at what everyone is doing.
I couldn't agree more. Sharon, any parting thoughts for our listeners today?
I completely agree with Aaron and Nicole. I suppose the other thing is I'd start looking at data. So stop making customers do the hard work when we can do it for them. So how do we use alternative sources of data to onboard customers in minutes, make it as smooth and slick as possible, and instead of being that kind of dull data capture form, how do we get customers to confirm what we already know about them and just reconfirm what we need to know to make a decision on their application. And I would completely agree about looking at industries out with financial services to see what they're doing. Look at the digital touch points that your customers are using in their day-to-day lives, and grab those experiences and make sure you make that part of their financial services experiences.
Amazing way to close us out. Well, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Nicole, Aaron, and Sharon for sharing their insights with us today. And a big thank you for all of you for attending and for giving us your time. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar if you'd like to share it with any colleagues. And if you'd like to get in touch with us to learn more about Onfido, the services we provide, and how we can help you with your onboarding journey, please visit us at onfido.com. Thank you very much.